My son never came home from school, and we thought he was at a tennis match.
Okay.
We don't know where he is.
On April 10th, 2018, Kyle Plush was scheduled to play a tennis match after school. But when Kyle did not make it home that evening, his father went looking for him. At the time, Ron Plush had no idea that what he would discover would not only change his family's world forever, but also the 911 emergency dispatch system all over the United States. Jill Plush said her son Kyle was the type of person that when he walked into the room, he just kind of lit it up. When you met him, you didn't forget him because he was just this amazing, bigger-than-life personality. He always had a huge smile on his face. He was witty and funny, and he was just a fun person to be around. Kyle suffered a spinal cord injury at 4 months old, and at the time he actually did die, but the doctors revived him back to life. After that event, realizing the value of time with one another, the Plushes were a very close family. They biked the Little Miami Trail, they kayaked together, they hiked, they skied, they'd go on long walks together. Kyle was particularly close with his mother, and they had this fun little bedtime goodnight routine that they would do. The family resided in Cincinnati, Ohio. Growing up, Kyle was a Boy Scout, and he continued to be one as he grew into his teen years. He volunteered at food kitchens, he helped the elderly, he even helped children read. At the age of 16, Kyle had permission to use the family car to go to and from school. He attended the private academy of Seven Hills School. Now, Seven Hills is an elite private school. It's actually voted the best private school in Cincinnati by Niche. And they have about 1,000 students, according to the Private School Review. The tuition there ranges between $6,700 to $24,000. Kyle actually joined Seven Hills in the 6th grade. In addition to other sports, Kyle was on the Seven Hills tennis team, and he was scheduled to play in a tennis match that evening on April 10, 2018. As he made his way to the courts, he stopped by his 2004 Honda Odyssey minivan to grab some tennis equipment. As he was reaching into the back third row to get his tennis gear, he actually got pinned by the third row seat. It actually collapsed on him, pinning his arms and upper body in between the seat and the minivan floor. What his parents call an amazing act of bravery in such a tense moment, Kyle had the wherewithal to call 911 using Siri on his cell phone.
Hey, 911.
Help.
Cincinnati 911. That is the address of your emergency.
Help. Help.
Cincinnati 911.
In my bed, outside the Seven Hills parking lot.
The Seven Hills what parking lot?
Help. I need help.
Where are you? Hello?
I'm gonna die here.
Where are you?
I probably don't have much time left to tell my mom that I love her if I die. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. I'm trapped inside my gold Honda Odyssey van in the Southwood parking lot of Seven Hills Theft. Send officers immediately. I'm almost dead.
The first call to 911 was at 3:16 p.m., and Kyle stated he could not hear the operator. The first operator managed to understand where Kyle generally was and sent officers to the Seven Hills School. 2 officers arrived on the scene approximately 10 minutes later at 3:26 p.m. This is their patrol.
I did. Poured hot. These kids drive better cars than you do. Looking at scientists. Which I don't imagine I would. Spina.
The second call was made 19 minutes later at 3:35 p.m. Based upon the call recordings, Kyle was on the phone with the operators for nearly 6 minutes pleading for help. The first operator misclassified the call as unknown trouble when entering it into the system, despite knowing he was trapped and hearing him banging and his screaming. That misclassification meant fire and rescue, who had sophisticated mapping equipment in their vehicles, were not called to the scene. The officers were there for 11 minutes, patrolling the area to look for anyone in distress. During this time, Kyle was making his second 911 call. This time, he gave more details of the van he was trapped in, including its color, make, and model. However, that information was never relayed to the officers on the scene. In the second call for help, because Kyle was mostly silent, the dispatcher implemented technology used for hearing impaired calls, which meant she couldn't hear him. Before the dispatcher hit the hearing impaired button, Kyle can be heard saying, "Help me," and saying to her, "I can't hear you." Officers Osborne and Brazile, while at the Seven Hills parking lot, never got out of their car. At 3:37 p.m., when they did not see signs of immediate trouble, the officers closed the incident and went back into service, never making it to the sophomore lot where Kyle's vehicle was located. Deputy Doug Allen was directing traffic when school let out, and he also assisted in the search of Plush's van. He was unable to locate the van as well. Regardless of his quick wit to use Siri to dial 911, help never arrived, and Kyle passed away in his van. He died of asphyxia due to chest compression, meaning a weight restricted his ability to expand his chest to breathe, and he was crushed to death. That evening, Jill Plush was busy making brownies for one of the children's school functions coming up. She knew Kyle had a tennis match, however, she just felt like he should have been home by now. She checked her Life 360 app, and it showed that Kyle was still at the school. She tried calling one of his friends, and he said not to worry because the matches do sometimes run late. By about 8:30, though, Ron and Jill Plush became worried.
I remember the exact moment when I told Jill, I said, call 911, I'm driving to the school right now. And I opened the garage and got in my car and drove as fast as I could. You know, Jill has tracked his phone to this location. I said it's likely in the van or somewhere around the van. So I had looked in the front seat. I saw his tennis racket in the front seat, so I knew immediately he never made it, you know, to the tennis match. And then
he was on the phone with me when he found Kyle.
At Kyle's funeral, where hundreds of people turned out to say goodbye to the boy who spent Sunday mornings in the front pews of the same church, Jill Plush recounted their special goodnight routine. At the end, she said one last goodnight to Kyle, followed by, I love you, see you in heaven. Kyle embraced life with a passion far beyond his years. We thank God for sharing him with us for over 16 years, but we are so desperately wishing he were here with us today. His family spoke out, stating that their son was funny, smart, and positive. Immediately following Kyle's death, the Seven Hills School sent out a letter offering counseling to the students. The letter stated, Kyle was a young man of keen intelligence, good humor, and great courage. And this whole community feels this loss very deeply.
Tonight, officials say the Mount Washington water tower looking over the funeral home is lit up in Kyle's memory.
Many pay tribute to Kyle. Before his tennis match against Cincinnati Seven Hills, Oakwood High School players donned wristbands with Kyle's initials and a heart on them. Before the opening handshake between the two teams, the Oakwood players then presented the wristbands to Plush's teammates. The City Parks Foundation also donated a pavilion at Stanberry Park in Kyle's name. Kyle was a longtime user of the Stanberry Park and was also a volunteer there. The new pavilion is named after Kyle Plush in recognition of Kyle and his grandparents, Joe and Judy Zarin. Vowing their son would not die in vain, the Plushes begged the city to make changes. With his background in business, Ron Plush drew up a 31-item spreadsheet of questions about what happened. City officials pledged to answer the questions and make the needed changes.
Let me begin by offering my deepest condolences and sympathy to the Plush family. This is an extremely tragic incident, and we want to convey that our thoughts and prayers go out to their family during this time. What I'd like to do is provide you with a timeline as we know it, as what occurred on Tuesday afternoon. What we know at this point, on Tuesday, April 10th, at about 3:14 p.m., a 911 call taker in our emergency communications section received a call from a subject stating that they were stuck inside a van outside in the Seven Hills parking lot. The caller said they were unable to hear the call taker and repeatedly yelled for help. There was also loud noise and banging that could be heard in the background on the initial 911 call. And since the caller indicated that they were unable to hear the call taker, they were unable to respond to any of the questions asked by the call taker, and consequently there was no exchange in dialogue between the call taker and the individual we now know as Kyle Plush. The duration of this call was 2 minutes and 56 seconds before the line disconnected. Less than a minute later, the call disconnected. After the call disconnected, the call taker attempted to recontact the caller, but received a voicemail message on the callback. At 3:21 p.m., The incident was broadcast over Channel 2 as an unknown trouble run, and District 2 cars were dispatched to the location. At 3:26 p.m., a two-person District 2 car arrived on the scene to investigate the incident. They patrolled the area and attempted to locate the caller and look for anyone that appeared to be in distress. At 3:37 p.m., the officers closed the incident and went back into service. A short time later, at 3:35 p.m., a second 911 call was received at the emergency communications section by the same caller. A different call taker answered this call, and during this call, the caller again stated that he was unable to hear the call taker and he was trapped in his vehicle. During the second call, the caller gave specific detailed information regarding the make, model, and color of the vehicle that was not provided in the initial 911 call. The call taker did not communicate with the caller, and the information from this second call was not relayed to the officers who were still on the scene at the time. We also know that at 3:44 p.m., after the Cincinnati police officers cleared the scene, a Hamilton County Sheriff's deputy was working a traffic detail at the school and called the Emergency Communications Center. The deputy indicated that Cincinnati officers who responded to the scene earlier told him they were looking for a caller who was trapped in a van. The deputy told the call taker he checked a van in the parking lot, but he did not find anything. He then requested any additional information that was available so that he could do a secondary check of the area. The family then contacted the Hamilton County Dispatch Center and advised that their son had failed to show up to a scheduled tennis match and had not returned home from school. A family member responded to the parking lot at 5400 Red Bank and located the gold Honda Odyssey van, which was unlocked. And inside the vehicle, Kyle was located not breathing and unresponsive. At 8:59, police and fire units from Cincinnati were advised of the incident and responded. And upon their arrival, they attempted life-saving measures but were unable to revive Mr. Plush. At this time, I've directed an internal investigation into the events of this evening, the actions of all of our employees involved. We intend to do a comprehensive investigation and review of everything that occurred. At this time, the call taker who received the second call has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of this investigation. Yes.
What reason did the call taker give for not relaying that information to police officers still on the scene that would have told them exactly what to look for?
We have not done a formal interview of her at this point. We intend to do that and get those answers. The one thing that we do know is that on that second 911 call, something has gone terribly wrong. This young man was crying out for help. We weren't able to get that information to the officers on the scene, and we need to find out why. I'm not certain at this point if we're talking about an equipment malfunction or some type of other user error possibly, but we're going to do an investigation to get those answers.
What's that tone that we hear on that, and does that have anything to do with why they...
Apparently there was some trouble on the line. She did press the tone to indicate that she's having some trouble on the line, that it could possibly be a call received from a hearing impaired person. But again, those are things that have been conveyed preliminarily. We want to get some formal answers as to what occurred.
The CAD report showed that at 3:16, the first call came in from Kyle, and when it was responded to, it was 4 minutes and 34 seconds later. Is that a correct reading of the report? That it took that long before it got into queue, before it was answered? Isn't that a long time if that's correct?
Well, that's something that we want to find an answer to, Tom. I don't know right now but that is something that's going to be examined. You know, this was a horrific tragedy. What I say is that we share in their heartbreak around this. police officers, firefighters, and even our emergency dispatch personnel, you get into this because you want to help. And something went wrong here, and we need to find out why we weren't able to provide that help that we hoped we could have.
Following the city's news conference, the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office announced it would also be conducting an investigation to see if proper procedures were followed. Only a week after losing Kyle, Ron and Jill's family were sitting in front of the city council asking for answers.
He knew he needed to call the one entity that could respond quickly and ultimately address the immediate crisis the best.
Know at this point if the responding officers got out of their vehicle?
I do not know that at this point. That will be something that is asked as a part of the investigation.
And Chief, do you know if any of the emergency responders contacted the school as part of their response?
Again, I do not know that at this point. That will be asked as a part of the investigation.
And I know you, obviously, you're a great chief. You've been with this department a very long time. I know you understand the gravity and the importance of those specific questions. So I think the public is incredibly eager and both concerned with.
I think the investigation in many ways raises more questions than it answers.
One thing I've heard over the past month is what happened to Kyle was the perfect storm. So was this a perfect storm or a series of multiple failures?
At 317, they knew there was a name of Kyle. They knew there was a van in a parking lot in Seven Hills in the thrift store parking lot.
City officials have tried to avoid blaming individuals for Kyle's death, focusing instead on systems, policies, and procedures. But Mayor John Cranley said it is clear people messed up that day, even if it was unintentional, and even if they didn't technically break policy. Mayor Cranley said the 911 operator should have immediately listened to the call recording. The dispatcher should have sent firefighters who have the mapping system police cruisers lack, and the responding officers should have gotten out of their car. It was wrong. I don't think we should sugarcoat it, and I don't think we should act like it was okay, because it is not. It ended in a death. The police report found technical and personnel problems contributed to the unsuccessful emergency response to Kyle's 2 separate 911 calls for help, but it ultimately concluded everyone involved followed proper procedures. This frustrated both the Plush family and city council members. It had been more than a month since Kyle's death, and the report still failed to answer important questions about what happened that day.
We need to continue to push for answers to all the open questions. The goal will be to implement a comprehensive plan to prevent another tragedy like this from happening again.
Ron Plush told city council members, "If a member of your family called 911 today, would you feel what happened to Kyle could potentially happen to them?" Several council members quizzed Police Chief Elliot Isaac and other police officials about the report's findings, but they came away unsatisfied with the responses. Mayor John Cranley said, "It is clear to me the report we have is incomplete. We need to get the answers." Later that same day, Law and Public Safety Committee Chairman Christopher Smitherman circulated a motion and found unanimous support to direct the city's administration to move forward on paying for an independent investigation into Plush's death. 21 CP Solutions is an independent company of seasoned professionals who work to help communities transform the delivery of public safety services. In the report they provided, it states, "It is perhaps easier for us to come to terms with a tragedy that occurred because of the bad acts of one person, a particular failure, or some concrete cause. It is harder when the cause of that tragedy is diffused or is a series of issues that, on their own, may not have led to it, but when taken together, set in motion a kind of perfect storm that led to a terrible outcome." In short, the outside reviews found there was no intentional harm. Ron and Jill wanted everyone involved in that call for help to be interviewed again. The officers submitted to only one interview in the investigation, which was the initial investigation done internally.
Did the high marks in the evaluation include any additional rating for leaving out key information that Kyle provided in his call, such as the banging, the screaming, and the knocking that could be heard on the call?
Kyle Plush's mother and father have been vocal about calls for change.
Well, I ask that we get the job done here and stop playing around. Please do that for Kyle, do that for our family.
They also pushed for a system called Smart 911, which launched in July of 2018.
We have to make sure that things change.
We're saying, 6 months later, we're still not talking about specifically what happened and what went wrong. This could potentially happen again, and we don't want that.
In August of 2019, after waiting for more than a year for additional answers and results, the family of Kyle Plush filed a wrongful death lawsuit in Hamilton County Commons Pleas Court. In the lawsuit, the Plush family is suing the city and several city officials and workers, alleging their actions led to the wrongful death of Kyle. These include former city manager Harry Black, who was on the job then, the 2 911 dispatchers, and the 2 Cincinnati police officers who responded to the scene. They're not happy with what's happened so far at City Hall. A political fight erupted that helped push out the city manager. Police completed an investigation that elected officials called inadequate, and Councilman Wendell Young said at a meeting to the family that they were witch hunting and there is no amount of money that would make you happy. They say their lawsuit is about more than that. Kyle was alive when the officers abandoned the scene. Kyle's father, not the police, finally discovered his lifeless body hours later. The lawsuit also alleges that the city was aware of previous complaints made regarding the police department's emergency communications section failing to locate callers and delaying dispatch in response to emergency calls. It alleges that the city was negligent, reckless, wanton, willful, and deliberately indifferent to the health of 911 callers. The city of Cincinnati spent more than $100,000 on 3 prior investigations that exonerated the call takers and officers of all wrongdoing. It has since sought to implement more training, hired additional staff, and upgraded the 911 system so people can enter information about themselves. The lawsuit, however, details a deteriorating 911 system in the months leading up to Kyle's death, which prompted months of city hearings and allegations that the 911 center wasn't properly staffed or trained. The city sought to have the lawsuit dismissed, but Judge Robert Rulman said no.
We were contacted in January of 2019 to pick up from where the city left off. The family had gone to the city, tried to get direct answers, went to many meetings, and got no clear information about what led to their son's death. And as you can see from the collection of statements by city council members at the last meeting of council, there was an agreement that they didn't have what they needed in order to really understand Kyle's death. But the city wasn't going to do anything further. So we were contacted in 2019 by the family. We hired 2 experts. I've gone to the Harris County 911 Center. I stood in the middle of a place that was operating correctly, and I said, what should have happened? And he walked me through it, and I saw how this should have led to a proper response to Kyle. And he has prepared a preliminary expert report based on the public records that we have secured. And we have filed that report along with the lawsuit today.
On the eve of the 3-year anniversary of Kyle Plush's death, the city of Cincinnati agreed to pay $6 million to the teenager's family to settle a wrongful death lawsuit, the second largest settlement in city history. In the settlement, the city is also pledging to make more improvements to the 911 center, which begins with $250,000 to hire 3 outside experts to look at the city's 911 operations. Oversight will last 5 years. And it also stipulates that improvements recommended by the experts must be made. Another review of why help never reached Kyle will also be done. One goal will be to access the actions or inactions of emergency call takers and first responders that contributed to the death of Kyle Plush, and the adequacy of the subsequent measures taken by the city to address those issues. The settlement also stipulated that the 911 center workers and police officers must be re-interviewed.
Hello, ECC staff. I want to address something you'll be seeing soon in citywide communication and on the news. The city and the family of Kyle Plush have agreed to resolve the lawsuit that have been filed by the family. Through settlement, each of the defendants in the case, including our call takers and the police officers, have been released from the lawsuit. The settlement will provide for a monetary payment to the family, and the city is also committing to continue to make improvement at the ECC a top priority. We will be doing so by pursuing accreditation, by continuing to align with national best practices, by using outside experts to advise the city, and by reporting regularly on our progress. The settlement also acknowledges how far we have come as a center and making improvements these last 3 years. We're just going to continue on that path of improvement, of always looking for ways to get better. We are going to continue to be transparent with the public and city leaders about how we're doing as a center, what we're doing to improve, and what resources we need to get there.
April Hines, the 911 Public Safety Answering Point Director, said, "When it comes to 911, it's not an easy job. There is no federal one-stop to get all the data, but there is about 20% shortage across the United States. Part of that is that it's an extremely difficult job, highly stressful, and can be emotional." Hines said that when 911 centers become low staff for whatever reason, retirements, somebody gets sick, once you are behind, it is very difficult to get caught back up because it takes so much training. In Cincinnati, training involves 6 weeks of classroom work as well as several weeks of on-the-job training. Call takers in Cincinnati earn between $51,000 and $53,000 a year. But the 911 center's struggles have continued even after the city tried to address the problems. In recent years, an elderly man who had suffered an apparent stroke died in his apartment despite his neighbors repeatedly calling 911. That incident led to a call taker being fired. The 911 center, which had been plagued by problems for years and was woefully underfunded, was yanked from police control and placed under civilian leadership that answers directly to the city manager. Employees at the 911 center have gotten additional training, including on how to handle calls that seem silent like Kyle's did, and more people have been hired. The city upgraded the system to what's referred to as a Smart 911, which allows people to put information into the 911 system that helps emergency responders when they are called. The outside oversight at the Cincinnati 911 Center is a team made up of 3 people who are experts in emergency communications. The team is tasked with producing a public written report about its assessment and recommendations. There's also a new policy that requires officers to get out of their car and look around when responding to unknown trouble, even if there seems to be none. In the immediate aftermath after Kyle's death, the city pledged to buy mapping equipment that could pinpoint where a 911 call was coming from and immediately show it on the map in an officer's cruiser. During Kyle's death, officers could have asked a dispatcher for latitude and longitude coordinates of the call and entered them into the system themselves. It's a cumbersome process that is not always used since most trouble is apparent when cops arrive. Despite pledging to do so, the city didn't purchase the equipment, and last said, officers have access to a city app that allows them to put information into the system and see a map, which is still a 2-step process. City officials, as last checked, were actively working on a more permanent and direct mapping solution. So now I guess it's time that I should address the elephant in the room. In the research that I've done on this case, I've noticed that very little attention was put upon the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Honda Corporation. The Cincinnati Enquirer published an investigation exploring a string of Honda Odyssey complaints concerning latching problems and seat stability issues before the April 10th death of Kyle Plush. The report also revealed an investigator's memo that showed he also had difficulty latching the same type of seat that killed Kyle. The Cincinnati Enquirer found more than a dozen consumer complaints regarding third-row seat stability in the Honda Odysseys. Outside safety experts say there's enough evidence to warrant a formal defect investigation. The agency refused to answer basic questions about their review of the Plush case. They also refused to provide even a basic update of its reform efforts. After the Enquirer's investigation of Kyle Plush's death, U.S. Representative Jan Schakowsky blasted America's top auto safety agency and is demanding more answers and action. She is the incoming chairwoman of the subcommittee that oversees the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Schakowsky said the Cincinnati Enquirer report paints a grim picture of an agency failing at its most basic safety duties, and it is unacceptable that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has failed to fully investigate and make public any related findings addressing the issues these reports raise. Honda must act swiftly to ensure the safety of its vehicles, and if they do not, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration should take such action on behalf of the public. Federal regulators received nearly 180 seat complaints from Honda Odyssey minivans over the years. A quarter of those complaints were over stability, and that 1 of 5 stability cases involved problems with third-row seats. More than a dozen warnings about the Odyssey's third-row seating for models made between 1999 and 2012 were found. Some complaints said seats were loose, rusting, and wouldn't latch. Others noted instances where heavy seats suddenly slammed down or flipped out of place. Honda said in an email statement that it hasn't received any direct claims of fatal injuries from interaction with third-row seats. Honda last year recalled some 900,000 later model Odysseys because of concerns about second-row seats tipping forward if not latched properly. However, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said that based upon the available information, including internal data analysis, the agency has not found evidence of a vehicle safety defect trend with the Honda Odyssey, but it would continue to monitor complaints and take further steps as appropriate.
As a mother who has experienced tremendous loss, I urge you to go to smart911.com and sign up right now.
Smart 911 is now part of Cincinnati's response to their failure that day, an upgrade to the 911 system, now in 500 call centers nationwide that gives dispatchers additional information. You sign up for free online and choose what info to provide. Things like medical conditions, car make and model, and emergency contact.
Even if your community does not have Smart 911, you can still sign up, and that information will be available to dispatchers when you travel to areas that do have it or when your community adds it.
I think there's going to be a lot of good things happening, and we're going to be with them along the way for the next 5 years.
I really think that he's looking down on us, and he's super proud of Al and his team for the work that they have done.
Ron and Jill Plush say it's still hard to believe that Kyle is gone. It's still hard to believe that this is our lives. So we need to make sure that this never happens to another family. See, in an uncanny coincidence, just 6 months before Kyle's death, he was involved with a student project that would allow the Apple Watch to revamp the 911 system to assist with locating someone in need. Little did they know, Apple was already working on this technology. So, Ron and Jill decided to turn their rage and sorrow into a mission to continue Kyle's pursuit to help others in need. Since reaching the settlement of their lawsuit with the city of Cincinnati, they started the Kyle Plush Answer the Call Foundation. The nonprofit will share the story of what happened to Kyle so 911 center employees remember real people are on the other end of the line. The foundation's website states, Kyle would have focused on solutions to improve the 911 system. He would not have seen the barriers of resources, money, or infrastructure, nor would he have made excuses for why things can't be done. Our family and the country, especially those who have the power to make nationwide change to the 911 system, owe it to Kyle to make sure these solutions are implemented to save lives when a loved one calls 911 in a life-threatening emergency. We can all support a cause focused on improving our emergency response system in Cincinnati and across the United States. The Foundation seeks innovative concepts designed to save lives, and this starts with us all doing our best. Their support focuses on 5 key factors. Support dispatchers and supervisors to be their best selves each day as they manage over 650,000 emergencies per day. Effective quality assurance that embraces a system of continuous improvement. Recruit qualified, experienced, and skilled leadership in the 911 centers. Establish a secondary non-emergency number, easy to remember, like 311, that routes the non-emergency calls to local police. And lastly, mental health for the 911 telecommunicators. Along with the Plush family, I encourage you to search out what type of 911 system is in your area to make sure you are taking advantage of any technology that will put more information into the hands of your first responders. Ron said, "We can't change what happened to Kyle, but we can change the future and make sure it never happens again. We want to ensure that when you do call 911, that help is going to come, and it's going to come immediately, and it's going to be the right help because seconds and minutes matter." Jill Plush wears a silver necklace around her neck with a charm engraved with the words Carpe Diem. Seize the day. It's her family's motto, one adopted by her son Kyle, who almost died as a baby and lived his life by those words. Lastly, in honor of Kyle, I have one last comment. Carpe the hell outta diem. Thank you for watching, and have a blessed day.